Welcome back to Monday Mod Tips. I am Captain Xavier, and today I'm going to be answering one of the more common questions that I get. What is a really simple mod that I can do to get started? And generally I will recommend a single shot Springer, a Night Finder, or a Fire Strike, or something where all you need is a screwdriver and an upgrade spring, which you can get on Amazon these days for $5 to $7. And then you can move on to, to more complicated springers, revolvers, and magazine-fed blasters, and you start needing kits and more tools and more knowledge and all of that. But for getting into flywheel blasters, there's a little bit even more of a jump, because at the very least, if you're going to be doing any kind of internal modifications to a flywheel blaster, you're going to need a soldering iron, and you're going to need to know how to solder. Now, you can get soldering irons fairly cheap. I recommend getting a decent one. I like the Weller station ones that you use here at the Makerspace. And you need to know how to use it. And there's lots of videos out there on how to solder. I've got a couple of videos myself, but I recommend finding, there's better ones than any of the ones that I've done. And I've pretty much everything I now know about soldering I learned from YouTube. So just do a little research and you can learn that skill. And then you are going to have to buy the tool, but it's one that you'll be able to use over and over and over, and it will more than pay for itself. So the very simple modification that we're going to do to this is that we're simply going to replace the motors with Honey Badger motors, and we're going to disable the thermistor. That's all we're going to do, and just that will have a remarkable improvement in performance. But first I want to take a look at the stock performance so that you can see how much of an improvement it really is. So, to the chronograph. Right, first things first, we're going to get the stock numbers. This is just on brand new, out of the package, AA's, in a otherwise stock Stryfe. I don't know the condition of the Stryfe, but we'll see what we get. 57, 65, 66, 69, 68, 67. So, the standard elite ranges. Not bad. Let's throw some Honey Badgers in here and see what happens. So there you have stock performance, right where you'd expect, 60s. Running on 6 volts, 4 AA's is 6 volts. So now we're going to do that upgrade. We're going to replace the motors, disable the thermistor. Hopefully the footage from that survived. Here we are inside, and like I said, the only thing we're going to do initially is swap out the motors. Pull the old motors out. They're still good motors, so I will keep them for possible repair purposes in the future. Alright, I have the motors in. They're a very snug fit, so you don't need motor screws. Obviously, stock cages are going to be noisy, and stock wheels aren't going to be the best. But we're not going for a high-performance build here. We're simply going for an improvement, which this will definitely be. Which actually, I am going to have to take whatever these little black things are off of here, and I don't think they will actually reach because these motor leads, the contacts are in a slightly different position on these motors than they are on these, and so they won't quite reach. So I will need to add a little extra wire. It is buttoned up. I'm going to put regular alkalines in here, and we're going to take it to the chronograph and give it a test, and if it does what I'm thinking it will do, and what it should do, and what I'm hoping it will do, it will stop working. And I will go into why and what needs to be done when that happens. And sure enough, if we rev it, it doesn't want to rev. I will explain what's going on as soon as it cools down enough to rev again. Alright, see if it's cooled down enough yet. It'll rev for a little while. and then droop and stop. And you would think that the batteries are getting drained, but that is in fact not what is happening. It is a safety feature built into the stock blasters to prevent you from burning out the system. And it uses, and I could be entirely wrong here, this is just what I've been told, and I could be repeating misinformation, and I hope I'm not. There is what is known as a thermistor in the blaster that if too much current goes through it, it heats up, and when it gets to a certain temperature, it will open the circuit. It will break the circuit and essentially disconnect your battery from the system. And the purpose for that is to prevent you from burning out your motors in the event of a jam, because when you jam your motors, they stall and it creates kind of a short circuit. It's not truly a short circuit, but when the motors are jammed, they draw a lot more current, and if they're not spinning and are drawing too much current, you can burn them out. So to prevent you from accidentally burning out your motors because you had a jam and just keep pulling the trigger, they put in what is essentially a fuse, but it's a temporary, automatically resetting fuse, and it's this little gizmo here. This little, get nice and close. This thing here is what is causing that to happen. So if too much current gets drawn through there, it will break the circuit. If we, no, locks. Too many locks. There we go. Now the full proper way to, if you really wanted to fix that, would be to take that board out and solder directly to the connection. However, if you want to do it the super easy way, you simply twist it so that the two wires are touching each other. Now, we push all of our locks. Oh, I guess I didn't make the connection. Are we too far up? There we go. Now we don't have that problem, because since I've connected the two wires at the bottom, normally the energy passes through it. Something in here heats up and it causes it to disconnect. When it cools back down, it closes again, and that is what is opening and closing your circuit. So it's like a switch that flips itself back and forth based, I believe, on heat, and you can tell because it warms up. But if you just twist it so that the bottom wires touch each other, then the energy just arcs directly across and it ignores that thing entirely. I'm going to button it back up again now that that has been fixed, as it were, or arguably broken. Wrong metal. Wrong screwdriver. And now we're going to see what kind of a performance increase we have gotten just from that small update. From putting honey badgers in and twisting the thermistor. What has that done to our FPS? Alright, retesting, still using Elite darts, but now we have double A's, just 4 double A's, but we have honey badgers, so let's see what we're getting now. 83, 90, 93, 89, 82, 87. So there you have it. High 80s, low 90s. And all we did was replace those motors and disable that thermistor. That's a $10 modification, because the motors are $5 a piece, plus shipping, plus solder. But it's very, very simple and very low cost, and yet we were able to get up to decent HVZ performance. 90 is a perfectly acceptable HVZ blaster because the zombies are coming to you. You don't need the long range and you don't need a high rate of fire. You just need to be able to hit what you're aiming at, and this will do that. And it's a really good place to get started because you do have to understand how the circuit works. You do have to know how to solder, and so there is some important stuff in there. So it's a good starting place. And the reason that it's able to run on just 6 volts is that honey badgers are remarkably versatile that way. There's a reason that that we like them in the hobby, is that they are very low current. they do not take very many amps, which is why they can run on just AA's and still be able to get you 90 FPS. The downside is that they are fairly low torque, and that's because they draw such little current. So they're not very good in, you know, high crush cages, unless you're running them on really high voltages. But they are able to do something like this, which is a really neat, very inexpensive starting build. And you can run them on other batteries. You can run them on 2S, you can run them on 3S, and they will perform well on all of those. They are just a workhorse of a motor. But for very simple, you can run them on AA's. And so that is the very simplest Stryfe modification that I can recommend. Next time I'm going to show another minor modification that you can make to it that will allow you to run it on cheaper batteries. Another one of the big hang-ups that a lot of people have is making that jump to LiPo batteries. And there's both the cost, because the chargers are generally fairly expensive and the batteries are expensive, and there's more, you have to then do full rewires, and there's a lot more work that goes into that. So there are some options for how to be able to run at least something like Honey Badgers on the simpler, less expensive batteries. If you're going to go to things like Krakens or Valkyries or Neo Rhinos or Neo Hellcats or Fang Revamps or Michelles, you absolutely just need to go to LiPo, because those things are such high current draw because they're designed to be such high torque. You have to have the current that only LiPo is really going to give you. But there are options for the low current motors, and that's what we will look at next time. So I hope this was helpful, and thank you guys for watching.